Now we're ready to sew the neckline. So we're going to place the shoulder seams of lining and upper material together, and then we're going to pin it all. We're also going to use a bit of stay tape in those areas which might stretch. And as you can see here, it goes across the fabric and this might stretch. And with that sewn in, this can't go anywhere and it'll be very firm. And then we're also going to understitch in here so that nothing rolls out. So let's get that neckline finished. First, we want to put the shoulder seams of the lining and the upper material together. So with the right sides facing each other, we're going to put all the seams on top of each other and then secure them with a vertical pin so that they can't go anywhere. And we do that basically all the way around. Now it's really important that everything lies really nice and flat while you do that. So I would recommend that you take your bodice and you put it really flat on a table so that you can see if you're doing it right. If you just do it on your lap, it's likely to not quite work out. So I'm moving this round now. There we go. The front is going to get a pin as well, and you can see I've marked the center front for both the lining and the upper material. So I'm securing that first and then work my way round from there. Now you have to be quite accurate with this and it'll come out beautiful. It might take you a few minutes, so make sure that everything is super flat and everything is exactly right. Then for the rest of the pinning, I put the pins in so that they lie to the left from the edge, because that's exactly how it'll be when you put it under the sewing machine. I'm also going to use some stay tape to understitch the whole lot. Now I have to say that for me personally, I am not a great fan of putting the stay tape on before I start sewing. I literally just take it when I'm doing the sewing. But if you are a beginner, this might be quite helpful to just pin it into place, and also you won't forget about it. And what this will do is it will definitely keep that area where you don't have the straight grain in the fabric in place, and it will not stretch, which it may do. Now I'm going to sew all the way around, and although I've allowed a centimeter seam allowance, I would recommend you do foot width, because number one, I like the little curve on the trim to show, and also I really think it's easier to use foot width, so it's either or, but you can decide yourself. When you come to a corner, you want to make sure that you reduce the stitch length to 1 or 1.5 so that when we snip right into the corner later, it can't fray or rip or anything like that. And then you stitch on that stay tape as you go across that area and make sure that the stay tape holds it in place. Now you can see I've removed the pin because I'm really uncomfortable with that. I pull it always a little bit tighter, the stay tape, and that gives it a really nice rounded effect on the shoulder. So for me, you know, I've been sewing for a very, very long time, professionally as well as a hobby. And so I can do that. And if you're the same, then yeah, put the stay tape on when you start sewing. Beginners, please pin it in to begin with. And now I'm going to sew across the front. I'm just making sure that I don't hurry myself, that I make sure that everything is nice and flat. And again, I reduce the stitch length in the corner and then I lengthen it again as soon as I've done a few stitches past that corner. And sew to the end of the shoulder again. As you can see, I'm quite happy to just, you know, hold the stay tape with my left hand or my right hand here, hold it nice and taut, and that way I guarantee that my shoulder won't stretch. Stitch length down again and needle in the fabric when you turn, but you already know that, I'm sure. And now we go to the end. Don't forget to secure your stitches, and that's it basically. It's beautiful. Now we're going to cut into the corners, right into that point, so that we can turn it. And we do that on all 4 corners that we've got here. Now the next thing is to guarantee that we don't have very thick seams. So I'm going to cut back my seam allowance. Make sure that I don't cut the stay tape as well. I move that out of the way, and then I cut back the seam allowance. You want to do that for the upper material. I'm also going to cut back the seam allowance of the lining. Another thing you can do is to cut back your seam allowance in stages, and that will make the seam a lot flatter. So if you want to do that for a special dress, for summer dress where you haven't used that many layers anyway because you don't have interlining, you might not need to do that at all. But if you want to do it, and this is a flower girl dress, for example, or a very special occasion dress, then cut back the lining. I would say do not cut back the trim because that's going to make it more bulky. So if you're cutting back, then cut back the lining only in a stage, because that part is going to not be seen, if you will. If you cut back the trim side of things, it might actually be bulky. You don't want that. Now I can turn the whole lot. And what we're going to do is some understitching now. And the understitching will ensure that when I roll this out, that it will sit absolutely beautifully. So you can start at the very beginning, but you can start as soon as you can, you know, maybe sort of 3 centimeters over here. And that will give you that beautiful roll, and your lining will not peep out. So it's about 1.5 millimeters away from the edge, and we're going to stitch that with a stitch length of 2.5, just regular stitch length all the way along. Really move the fabric apart, and then the seam allowance has to lie into the lining. I think it's very clear here. You can see that very well. It shines through. And I really pull the fabric apart, because if you don't do that and you sew in like little pleats or folds, there's no point to doing this at all. You might as well just press it. And pressing is also ironing, right? That's the same term. And here you can see how we have a little bit left standing now of that curve, because I used foot width both to make that little trim, but also for my neckline. And I really like that. So you have to decide what you think will look best, but I would say do the foot width. I think it's really, really, really pretty. Very pleased with that. Round the last corner. And I go as far as I can go. And that's it basically. Just hold it apart with your fingers. I do that 2-finger thing. And now we've got a beautiful edge. Not only will it not roll out, your edge is also much firmer like that. There's absolutely no way any of that will stretch or not sit very well. You can see here how even without ironing it, it will just sit beautifully. But of course we are going to iron it now very carefully. I'm actually ironing with a hot temperature. You can iron silk as hot as you like. It's a misconception that you can't. It's a natural fiber, so anything goes. But if you are doing it, I'm doing it here on the linen setting with a lot of steam. My lace is no doubt polyester, and that may melt when the iron touches it. So I'm very careful not to touch that lace. And then I go all the way around, and I'm using very much the tip of my iron for this so that I don't have these little indents when I'm finished, so it tends to do that. The next step is to lie everything completely flat now, because we're going to see where the fabric has shifted. When you're understitching, it will do that because obviously it will roll over further. And we're going to trim our pieces now so that they're exactly the same, both for the lining and the upper material, so that when we put in our sleeve, everything will sit pristine once we turn this, because we are moving the fabric edge on edge when we do the sleeve. This is really important, and I think something you can take away when you work with other designers' patterns as well, not just mine, that if you get the bodice at this stage completely lined up, you don't have to worry about a thing. It will come out absolutely perfect when you're done. And so I'm trimming back everything so that everything is right on top of each other, like here on the shoulder. It's not actually much, but it might make a difference to the overall look when you're done. And all I'm doing now is making sure my interlining doesn't slip or anything. That's what my pins are there for. The rest comes out. We can open it out now and get ready for the next step, which is to put our cap sleeve on. Of course, if you are using the puff sleeve, then you would carry on now with the side seam.